Hey everybody, it's your boy Pee Wee back with another video. I'm gonna pull my mic closer because it was a little far. Today we're going to be talking about the new manhwa being released. It's called the Immortal Genius Spearman, or whatever that pronunciation is, because I am not going to even try. Um, Quick synopsis is our main character, he spends decades on the battlefield, which is weird. I do want to, like, not like it's weird in the way of like him actually spending the decades on the battlefield. It's weird in a sense that it's like when he reincarnates, he basically says he reincarnated 17 years in the past, which is like not even 2 decades, but I digress. Our main character, he basically his family lost everything. We start out with like a little synopsis of him. Basically, just he is like death, so to say, of his first life, where he collapses on this battlefield after killing 2,000 enemies, and then he wakes up in like his younger self's form, right? Like I do want to say, uh, anyways, basically went into his younger self, where at the point it was like where his life took a turn for the worse was his parents ended up dying. And his uncle here tried to basically steal all of his family assets. In his previous life, he trusted his uncle by signing this document, basically handing over his inheritance to his uncle, who then eventually like sold him out to like uh street thugs and like sold into like slavery essentially. In his previous life, however, in this life he tears it up and he decides that the insurance money will be deposited into a bank account in his name, and basically does the complete opposite of what he did in his previous life. um Obviously, this is the whole start of his I'm not going to live how I did before, and he's going to rectify the things that went wrong in his previous life. But he's returned to the past. Then we get a glimpse of like him on the battlefield here, how him and like 90 to 100 other men were basically ordered to wipe out a force of over 2,000, which is obviously not something that would be possible. But he was a centurion of a basically a war unit. Him and all of his people that he went to war with all ended up dying. And he started having those usual regrets that a lot of these reincarnated, no, regressed what characters tend to have, where it's like, if only I had been stronger, if only I started practicing sooner, if only I started taking things more serious. It's like the typical regression, regrets as they're dying, and the typical if I were given just one more chance. And and he is given that one more chance. He reincarnates into the past and his younger self 17 years back, which is why I was talking about earlier when it said decades. It's kind of just weird translation issue, I would assume. uh but basically, in this world, in order the mana hole is like essentially your belly button, and that's where you use that to like absorb and like train the mana in this world. I don't really know how it works other than like that. But he was orphaned, he was sold into slavery, he rose to the rank of centurion into the imperial army, and then he eventually dies and regresses into his younger self and decides, basically, going forward he's going to live his life slightly differently than before. But ultimately his goal is to live a better life. By the end of the first chapter, he's getting ambushed here, and we can see some of the skills from his previous life because he could sense them outside the door. He launches a surprise attack, and he ends up fighting them off for the most part. Um, and then at the start of the next chapter is him finishing the fight. So it's like, we get glimpses of his former self already. So I am, it's a regression comic. It doesn't seem like it'll be anything special. The art didn't seem like anything too special. um it looks like something to take at face value, that you're gonna get what you like obviously think you're gonna get with these type of comic, which isn't a bad thing. Obviously I'm not saying it's bad or anything. It is the same generic plot. But The reason why, it is generic and a lot of people make these types of plot is because, it's something to read, and there are people that, eat up all the regression slop there is. I'm not saying that this is just going to be a generic slop, but I don't want you or anybody else to go into this thinking that, it's going to be something that's like outstanding, or, um completely different. It could be down the line. It very well could turn into a really good story. It could turn into something that does stand out. But the first impressions and based off the first couple chapters, it feels like it's just your generic regression. If I get one more chance, I'll do better type of comic. So, which isn't bad. I mean, it's definitely not something I'm going to like read every single week, but it's definitely something I will read to pass the time if I'm waiting for other chapters to pile up for other comics. So, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's always up to you guys what you want to read. I make these reviews simply because I like to talk about the comics I read and the comics I find and the comics I check out myself. So, but that's really all I want to talk about today in this video. Leave a like, leave a sub. I hope to see you guys more in the future. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.